Now, Mr. Himes, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's just start with your feelings, that visceral feeling as it was happening. At any point, did you feel like your life was in danger, or did you feel like this was going to get brought under control at some point?
Yeah, I can't say I felt like my life was in danger, but there were at least 15 very, very anxious moments, as we were being taken out of the House chamber, and I was actually with Connecticut Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro at the time. Officers had their weapons drawn. There had been a concussion, which I think might have been the tragic shooting of the one woman who lost her life in the Capitol yesterday. And the police had piled furniture, of all things, against a door, the main door of the House of Representatives, and you could hear people using some sort of device to try to batter their way in, and these officers had their guns drawn and pointed. So in that moment, yes, there was anxiety. There was also a great deal, viscerally is the right word, I just felt very, very sad for our country. I never in a million years imagined that this building that I've been going into for years right now, that symbolizes our democracy, messy though it might be attacked by an insurrectionist mob. And never in my life did I imagine that insurrectionist mob would be driven by the President of the United States.
A lot of you and a lot of your colleagues live tweeting as this was happening yesterday. We were hearing a lot of you saying, I'm okay, but here's what's happening. Talk a little bit about this in those moments.
Well, again, it was pretty quick in developing. We were all just starting to get comfortable and relieved at the notion that the Vice President, Michael Pence, was going to perform his constitutional duties. There was some concern going into this that he might actually do what the President asked him to do, which was to override the Congress or whatever it might be, change the outcome of the election. But Mike Pence demonstrated that his loyalty in that moment was going to be to the Constitution and not to Donald J. Trump. So just as we were getting relieved by that, it quickly became apparent that the Capitol was under attack. And as I said, it was just sort of inconceivable. I mean, most of us didn't even know that there were gas masks under our seats, and when we were ordered to take those gas masks out and put them on. So it was a pretty shocking half hour.
Congressman, with whom were you sheltered, and what were those hours like? Obviously, this took a long time to play out. Was there any talk, was there any sort of bipartisan talk about how this changes the calculus or how to respond to this?
Well, there wasn't yesterday, and just to answer your question specifically, again, there were probably 100 members in the chamber at the time, and they very quickly escorted us out, and we went through some staircases and tunnels and sheltered in a very big conference room together. There were about 100 members together, probably 75 staff members. That moment was still quite nervous. The Capitol Police had lost control of the entire Capitol and of the buildings that surround it. So it was a very tense moment with this, roughly 200 people together in this very large room. The police were still very, very anxious, very nervous. And no, there wasn't a lot of that conversation. There needs to be more of that conversation. I mean, it was incredibly disheartening though it was nice to go back pretty quickly to get our job done, to just right out of the box hear my Republican colleagues stand on the floor and, despite what they had just been through, repeat the misinformation, the lies that the President of the United States has been peddling for the last 2 months. That actually broke my heart. You would have thought that maybe after it was shown that maybe our government was vulnerable to that lie, to those lies and that misinformation, that they might have said, hey, let's take a step back. By the way, they did in the Senate, right? The Senate basically said, we're not doing this anymore. But too many of my Republican House colleagues just, are so cult-like focused on what Donald Trump tells them that we went back and spent another, 4 hours or so arguing about whether this election had been legitimate.
We're getting a lot of angry emails this morning, Congressman. A lot of people saying the president never explicitly told people to go attack the Capitol building, and they don't understand why this rhetoric led to what it did. We're getting some people. I have a Gary who wrote in saying, have you forgotten Maxine Waters telling the left to, quote, get in the faces of the Republicans? When Sarah Huckabee and Mitch McConnell were accosted in restaurants, where was their democracy? What do you tell to these people who are not making making any sort of connection between the two and think they shouldn't be making a connection between the president's rhetoric and the violence.
Well, that's not a debatable point. The president said, march to the Capitol. It's going to be wild. He stoked them on. His personal lawyer said we should resolve this through combat over and over again. This is not a debatable point. Look, I've been an elected official in the era of Trump for 4 years now. So I understand that there's a significant chunk of people out there for whom what is evident to their own eyes doesn't matter. What matters is what Donald Trump tells them, or what OAN or what Fox News tells them. That's all that matters. Now, look, and let me be fair here. This is not, though today it is somewhat unique to the supporters of Donald Trump, this is not unknown in my own party. But there's no question that Donald Trump fomented this insurrection. Mitch McConnell himself recognized it. Republicans like Mitt Romney and others recognized it. Lindsey Graham recognized it. So don't listen to this Democrat. Listen to people like that if you can't stand to hear it from me. That's not in question. The question of the whataboutisms is just absurd. To say that because Maxine Waters said something intemperate, that's somehow equivalent to a mob taking over the Congress of the United States is absurd. And by the way, let's hold ourselves to a slightly different standard in this country that we call a city upon a hill. Let's hold ourselves to a slightly higher standard than they did it too. You know, I'm the father of 2 daughters, and when they were young and they said, well, she did it too, that wasn't an excuse. I mean, how in this country can we say we can justify anything because I believe that the other side does it too? We've got to hold ourselves to a higher moral standard than that.
All right. Powerful stuff. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Congressman Jim